Hey everyone, and welcome to our interview series where we're highlighting ways that people are fostering mental health while practicing physical distancing. And today I'm excited to announce our special guest today is David Holmes, who is the founder of the Character Collaborative. And he's doing some awesome work in terms of college and high school admissions processes and also fostering mental health and wellness on campuses. So thank you so much for joining us, David.
Yeah, thank you, Donna. I'm very glad to be here with you this morning.
Yeah, I wish we could be more physically close, but hopefully next year I'll get an opportunity to visit.
That's the situation we've been given, I think, for quite a period of time.
Yeah, but I have to say I've enjoyed connecting with people on Zoom, so that's at least a good opportunity as well. Can you tell us a little bit about the Character Collaborative and what you're doing with that and how that came about?
Uh, sure. From my point of view, it goes back to 2013 when Angela Duckworth gave a TED Talk that went viral. And I think literally millions of people happened to hear her talk about grit and character. And at the time, I was the head of school in Idaho. Sort of an elementary, middle, and upper school, a school that pays great attention to attributes of character and character strengths. And her presentation resonated with us and with our board. And that led me to think about the role of character in a much more explicit way in education. But in addition to that, it kind of resonated with me when I thought about the college admissions process. And having been a head of school for a total of 17 or 18 years at two schools, one in Connecticut and one in Idaho, as a head of school, I had long been frustrated by the fact that we graduated some absolutely wonderful young men and women who are going to make a difference in the world, who may not have had the absolute highest SAT score or even GPA. They may have only had a 611 or whatever it might be, or a 3.9. And of course, like many of us, I began to think about what's the difference in terms of those scores when you have a young person with phenomenal potential and a person with resilience and perseverance and a sense of teamwork and goal orientation. And so I began to think about how perhaps in this frustrating college admissions process, we could begin to focus more on the kind of attributes I just mentioned, character attributes, character strengths. And so sitting there at my desk in Idaho in 2016, I wrote an article that was published in the Journal of College Admission, which essentially proposed a revision to the way we do college admissions, retaining, of course, at that point, SAT scores and ACT scores and GPA and recommendations, but explicitly adding in character criteria into the way young people would be assessed in the college admissions process. And out of that, I had a ton of discussions around the country, and a good friend of mine who was vice president for enrollment at Drew University, and before that Lafayette, we got into conversation and we said, let's get a group of people together that might share the same point of view, that it's both time to look at revising the way we do college admissions and adding in the kind of attributes that I mentioned. And so in the fall of 2017, we got 40 or 50 people together just before NACAC in Columbus, Ohio. And the discussion seemed to resonate with everyone, and we made the decision to create a small organization, which is now called the Character Collaborative. And the aim of the organization is to elevate the role of character attributes in the admission process. That's straightforward. And since that time, our organization has grown incrementally every year. We now have about 80 institutional members, college admissions deans, probably about 35 college admissions deans, schools, primarily college counselors, 7 or 8 national educational associations are at the table, along with what I would call the reformers, including Angela Duckworth in the Character Lab at Penn, and the Making Caring Common project, for example, at Harvard, led by Rick Weisbord, who's doing some great work up there. So incrementally, we have gathered strength around the country and become pretty active in presentations and writing on this topic. And what I think is happening is that there's a growing movement both to alter the way we make college admissions decisions and to elevate attributes other than what we call the purely academic or cognitive dimension. So it's an exciting road with a long way to go. And of course, events in the last several months, it seems like just 3 months, is it? 3 or 4 months with COVID-19 shakes up the whole enterprise. And it raises some interesting questions, I think, long term about what colleges are going to look like and how college admissions will evolve. So as you know, there's just a tremendous tumult in the educational world at this moment. And perhaps this is an opportunity to embed long term some of the beliefs that I know you and I share about educating young people and how you do college admissions and the real attention we have to pay to I would say mental health, physical and mental health, and it's all connected, I think.
I think that it was coming before, but I think I look at, you look at the education field, and sometimes it's a very resistant to change field. It's hard to get stuff done quickly, and I think we were seeing that in terms of online learning, and all of a sudden it had to happen. So there was a push, and I think we're going to see the same thing in terms of, all of a sudden a lot of schools are going test optional because the logistics of getting the testing done is very difficult. So I think some of the things that you've been working on for so long, this is a great opportunity. Have you seen that shift?
Well, yeah, I'm seeing that shift, but I just wanted to make a point in your first sentence there. Part of what we need to think about is how we foment change in a system that is so diverse and has so many pieces, and there's politics to it, there's economics to it. And so I've given thought over the years for a lot of different reasons about how you make change in this kind of federalized system. And I guess I really believe you need to start with the grassroots and build support over a period of time, get leaders and institutional leaders at the table, and don't have expectations you're going to turn the world upside down in a year or 2 or 3 years. And so that was really, the set of assumptions that we set out with. And then in a certain way, our world blows up, which you just alluded to with COVID-19. And, the test optional movement had been growing over a period of time. And there were, about 11 or 1,200 institutions that had chosen to go test optional up to 3 or 4 months ago, and including some very prestigious ones, such as the University of Chicago. And now, as you rightly point out, there are more institutions that are making the standardized tests optional, or in fact, if you read the newspapers, eliminating those tests, the ACT, the SAT, in the short run. So that's certainly one force that's operating. And then you alluded to online learning, and just think of the kind of revolution that has occurred in the way teaching and learning is taking place in public schools, independent schools, and in the college and university world. And one observation I'll make from my own past, where in an earlier life, I headed up a center on teaching excellence at a university. And one of the things I know is that online learning can be done very poorly. And I think with the, thousands of teachers thrown into this new situation, they've been in a kind of a survival mode. And one of the developments that I hope will come to the fore will be some real attention to how you teach effectively in an online situation. And there are a few places and a few institutions and many teachers that are experimenting. So one of the things I think that, and you alluded to this, we will learn a lot about the strengths and the potential of online learning. We'll also learn about some of the obstacles and problems with online learning. Absolutely. And so that's another piece of the puzzle that is throwing a lot of things up in the air. And I really do believe that with the experience of COVID-19 in families, in institutions, that we will, and hope, we will pay greater attention to some of the attributes that we know from research and common sense make much greater difference long term in the health and wellness and success of young people.
I think we were moving in that direction. One of my favorite books is Julia Lythcott-Hames's book about how to raise an adult, and the importance of some of those character and resilience and things in terms of when we were focused in. And one of my favorite metaphors is one that she uses talking about bonsai children, that sometimes she saw these resumes that were fantastic, and it was like the parents had pruned these beautiful bonsai trees, but bonsais don't survive in the wilderness. And so we need, childhood is a rough, it's not pruned beautifully. And I think about how important those traits are as we move on, and how difficult character can be sometimes. It kind of goes against our brain sometimes. We want to do what's right, what feels good here and now, but isn't necessarily the best for us in the long term. And I think we're seeing some of that right now nationally, just that those moral dilemmas, and what I want to do isn't necessarily what's good for the world and our country and the healthcare workers. And those lessons are hard to learn.
For sure.
But we want people who are going to make those decisions in leadership in the future. So I think that's so critical.
Well, I think you touch on a great point, and how much there is at stake in what we're doing as parents and educators. And I think hitting close to home is the health and wellness and mental strengths of our children.
Yes.
And as teachers of our students. And I think the statistics when you look across the country, for example, at college campuses, the health centers are absolutely overwhelmed with psychological issues. And so there's something operating in the culture of our nation, in the way we're raising our children, but perhaps the way we are educating our children in schools. And that's very, very worrisome. But the other, I think, long-term, truly large issue is the one you alluded to. What kind of nation do we want to be? What kinds of values do we want to shape the nation, shape our community, shape our neighborhoods, shape the towns in which we live, and shape the national political culture, leadership culture, if you will. And frankly, a motivating piece to me that I should have mentioned is going back to the Great Recession and kind of understanding some of the ethical issues or problems that led to a tremendous impact on millions of people in terms of the recession and the sources of that recession. And having well-educated, competent leaders with strong character and strong principles and values is so fundamentally important to all of our institutions, whether they're private institutions or our state, local, and national governments. And so there's really a tremendous amount at stake in terms of what kind of people are we, what kind of children do we want to educate and develop, and what kind of a nation do we want to be.
I completely agree. And I think it's so critical that we address that right now. And I also want to go back, because you alluded to the issues on college campuses and what we were seeing even before COVID in terms of mental health issues among students. And we've had a lot of interest from college level and university level people looking at how can we teach mental health and what mental wellness, and how can we prepare students before they come onto campus and have these issues. And I know you have another initiative that I would love to hear a little bit more about in terms of health and wellness on college campuses.
For sure, there's a growing interest and I think a growing body of expertise and research about how to at least begin to address some of these issues in this case, on college campuses. I would mention one area that has been particularly fruitful. The JED Foundation, based in New York, is collaborated with a number of colleges around the country to develop programs to intervene with young people and foster, both prevent and deal with issues on campus. And that's really important. But I've been giving a tremendous amount of thought to these issues. I actually, throughout my career, being a head of school, where the first obligation is the health and safety of your students, and the kind of issues that develop through adolescence. And so over the last few months, I've collaborated with a couple of people around the country to develop an initiative that looks at fostering health and wellness on campuses, but from a comprehensive point of view. And there are kind of two intersecting pieces that we're paying attention to. The first is what I would call the built environment. And that would be the campus itself, how it's laid out, the buildings that we build, and the characteristics of those buildings, and the systems that, heating and cooling and energy systems that are on a particular campus. And there's been some development nationally around, as you know, healthy buildings, et cetera. But it hasn't been consistent, and for sure, and we look at our college and say independent school campuses, there's some real issues around how campuses are laid out and whether they foster or deter a healthy lifestyle. And then secondly, of course, the other intersecting piece are the things we do by way of programs and the culture that young people have on campuses. And those, it's addressing things like the kind of food and the amount of food that students ingest on campus, what kind of exercise do people get, and what kind of an environment in the dorm. Is it noisy and interfering, and substance abuse issues? And so our premise is that the two really are intersect and need to be addressed at the same time. And so we are beginning to reach out to colleges and university leaders, as well as independent schools, to be able to work with them to build a campus that both has the built environment fosters health, as well as the kinds of programs. And the JED Foundation is a good example that is working with faculty and students and staff. And what we're thinking is that in a certain way, our world is on hold for a period of time, isn't it? And that at some point, the colleges will get back to something that may never be the old normal, but it's going to be hopefully closer to the old normal, where there are human beings collected on campuses. And what we hope to be able to do is to work with colleges and universities when we begin to come out of this disruptive situation, and plan in a more coordinated way to foster health and wellness. I'd like to put it in the positive, to foster health and wellness, the prevention side of things, but there's also the intervening to deal with existing problems. And I know, Donna, your work on teaching the literacy of mental health, it plays right into the set of needs that are out there. And I also believe that character strengths such as resilience and perseverance and teamwork and goal orientation and gratitude are connected to a healthy living.
Yes.
Connected to mental health. And that's where the Character Collaborative, I think, really has a role in collaboration with, you, Donna, and others around the country, because I think it's, as I said before, it's all connected. But at the end of the day, we need some very concrete, forceful, effective programs and interventions. And that's where it gets down to ground zero. And I think collectively we have to work on all these fronts that are interconnected.
I think that's so critical. And I think that your work is phenomenal in that area. I was laughing when you were talking about the actual physical existence of the buildings and the campus and that. And I got my doctoral degree at Teachers College at Columbia University. And I remember when my husband came, I think it was when I was defending my dissertation, he hadn't been onto the campus, but he had seen Columbia University and he had seen the business school before. And he walked into the building and he was like, what? And, everything was falling apart. It was the buildings themselves. And he was shocked that, there was this lack of care of the buildings at such a prestigious university. And it is a great university, but it was just really funny because I was like, oh, well, we're in the teachers college. Like that's different
I,
expectations
I
there.
know that street and I know that building well. And I had the same experience when I headed off from college, where I had played, frankly, sports through all 4 years and arrived on the Columbia University campus. And, and right there, safety is kind of the first concern that you have, and every college campus has to pay attention to safety. And that's all part of the mix of things that we're talking about. But when you end up, no matter where you are, but how do you continue or begin an exercise program that keeps you healthy along the way? And then how do you, frankly, how do you have open spaces, green spaces, and all the things that most of us are aware of? But when it comes to college campuses and also independent school campuses, there's this arms race to build big, beautiful
Right.
buildings. And that's a selling point, as we all know. And but there hasn't been a lot of forethought in implementation of the kind of principles that we are now well aware of in designing, the buildings and the campus and so on and so on. There's been incremental progress, but I think the need is so great that we need to pay much more explicit attention to all these kinds of issues.
And I think that I always go back to the key is the brain science, because if we understand what fosters brain health, that's what we should be paying attention to, not necessarily how beautiful the building is, but how does it allow us to do the things that foster health in our brains. And even things like initiatives that encourage the students to be involved in something that matters, some purpose, because we know that that's such a key part of brain health. And so, if you're doing, I know that you and I both have ties to Middlebury College, and I know that, one of the students wanted to go carbon neutral. They're like, all right, let's do it. I think that getting the students involved in things that they feel like matter is really critical as well. And that's tying into that.
I absolutely agree, because I think, what's the motor that drives each of us if we're excited and heading off in a positive direction? And I think it's having a sense of purpose.
Yes.
And I feel very fortunate in these days of isolation that I'm in interaction with people like you and my colleagues in the Character Collaborative around a sense of purpose that we all share. And that's kind of that's the motor that keeps me going, and the opportunity to have the kind of discussion that we're having today. And I think to be able to embed or foster a sense of purpose, a positive sense of purpose among young people, is one of the great goals or missions of all of our institutions, as well as parents. And that means authentic learning. It means making social connections, collaboration, and not competition, and not being driven by those artificial numbers that might appear in a college application and whatever. And so I think there's a kind of a revolution necessary in the way we think about raising young people and educating young people about the things that are most important. I should tell you that one piece of information that's shaped my thinking is the research that's gone on over the last 10 or 15 years that demonstrates that having a particular set of character attributes is the strongest predictor of success in school, in work, in life. And James Heckman, the Nobel Prize-winning economist at Chicago, has done some great work, and Nathan Kuntzel at the University of Minnesota, and Angela Duckworth. And if you look at that body of research, it's just highly convincing that the things you and I are talking about today not only foster healthy people, but it promotes success in the real world.
That is so true. And the work that you're doing is fantastic. So I have one last question, because we're going to need to wrap up. How are you fostering mental health right now yourself?
Well, I think, first of all, it's a sense of purpose of the kinds of conversations that you and I are talking about. I have something to do every morning when I get up, but a piece of my life forever has been sports and exercise and getting outdoors and being in nature. And I wake up every morning and look out at this beautiful, where I am in Vermont, Lake Champlain and the Adirondack Mountains are to the west. And I say, I'm so lucky to be alive. So
Mhm.
lucky to be alive and have nature to appreciate. But that's true wherever we live. I remember living in New York City, and there's Central Park or Riverside Park, and there's the Hudson River over there, and those beautiful sunsets over the Hudson River to the west that were fueled by oil refineries, I know, but they were beautiful. Uh, so I guess my quick answer in my case is staying and getting in shape and getting exercise and riding a bike and hiking and cleaning up brush outside, and then pursuing the goals and the interests that we all share. And so thus far in isolation, it's gone okay.
Good. I'm so glad to hear that. And I think that those are things that, we look at the brain, and those are the things that matter. Those are the things that foster mental health, because we have purpose. We have something that we can do. I think getting outside, even if you can't get outside, having, looking at some forms of nature, even in pictures, it's interesting. Our brains respond to that. So that's wonderful. Thank you so, so much for joining us. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Donna, and congratulations on your work. This all comes together, and as you can tell, I'm excited and enthusiastic about the direction that all our work is going. So thank you for the opportunity to chat.
I'm really excited about it as well. But thank you so much.